The banners for Wuthering Waves version 3.3 are officially revealed, and I am here to answer the question of which of these characters is the best. Small little disclaimer, I'm only going to be talking about the 3 banners running in the first phase, those banners being Hiyuki, Mornye, and Iuno. The reviews for the second phase characters will be the next video, so stay tuned for that. Starting with the new character Hiyuki. Hiyuki is a Glacio Sword DPS who centralizes her kit around the Glacio Chafe mechanic. However, unlike previous negative status DPSs, she somehow manages to strike a good balance between a regular hyper carry as well as her negative status mechanics. The way Hiyuki works is that with certain skills, she will be able to apply Glacio Chafe. And whenever anyone in the team applies Glacio Chafe whenever Hiyuki is also in the team, instead of applying a stack of Glacio Chafe normally, it will instead immediately deal damage based on the current stack cap for Glacio Chafe, which incentivizes using Chisa or other characters that are able to increase the cap of Glacio Chafe, which currently is only Chisa. She does apply a lot of Glacio Chafe on her own, but these mechanics obviously incentivize the use of other Glacio Chafe characters that are currently not yet in the game. However, she does not have any Zani-esque mechanics that say that her damage counts as Glacio Chafe, because most of her damage is in fact Liberation, meaning she'll be perfectly fine when using Lene instead of a dedicated Glacio Chafe support, which I believe was intentional because the dedicated Glacio Chafe support does not exist yet. However, being a liberation damage dealer does come with another curse, being the fact that there really aren't any good liberation damage buffers outside of Lene. And with Lene being the best in slot in the Toon Rupture Imouth core, as well as a ton of other characters, she is a very contested unit. Which means that if you want to get Hiyuki and use her on her release, you're gonna need to gimp one of your other teams, assuming you are someone who has Imouth, which you most likely are because she is one of WuWa's best-selling characters. As it stands, Hiyuki is more reliant on Lene than she is on Chisa even, because Lene and Mornye are just that powerful of a duo together. However, when the Glacio Chafe support comes out, this will no longer be an issue, and I believe that this is the only big issue that Hiyuki currently suffers from. I would say that Hiyuki is reliant on 5-star teammates, but honestly, at this day and age, most characters in WuWa are, so I don't really feel confident putting that down as a con. So when you're getting Hiyuki in 3.3, you have to treat her like she's Bitcoin. She's going to be an investment when we eventually get the Glacio Chafe support, and I don't think we're gonna have to wait long. I believe Lucilla is going to be our Glacio Chafe support, and that she is going to release in version 3.4. However, that team is most likely going to really want Chisa. So ultimately, you're gonna need to make some investments when it comes to Hiyuki anyway. And for those reasons, I'm going to give her a rating of A. Next up is Mornye. And honestly, I don't really know what to say about Mornye that hasn't already been said 1,000 times before. Mornye is a universal healer who happens to have a specialty within the Toon Break niche. When it comes to team flexibility, she's the only character who's really able to stand up to Shorekeeper in that regard, outside of maybe Lene. Shorekeeper can fit in almost any team in the game, and any team where you can use Shorekeeper, Mornye is a viable option too. Her Ultra skill is slightly stronger, but she trades that for not having any of Shorekeeper's crit buffs. While she does have a damage bonus buff in her kit, but this mechanic is unfortunately locked behind teams who are able to apply Toon Shifting, which means that if you're just putting Mornye in something like a Carlotta Zhezha team, you are not going to have access to this buff, which means ultimately, she is kind of just an outro skill bot with an attack buff through her set. However, this in and of itself is not a bad thing, especially because if you use her on an R5 Discord, her rotation is almost just as short as Shorekeeper with an R5 variation. So ultimately, while Mornye is not as good as a generalist as Shorekeeper is, she is able to fill that same role. So whenever Shorekeeper is taken, Mornye is able to fill in. Or you just don't have Shorekeeper at all. However, Mornye very quickly starts to catch up the second Lene is added to the team. And with how universal Lene is, that is quite a lot of teams. Teams like Galbrenna, Lene, and Mornye are going to do better than Choyuin and Shorekeeper, simply because the Lene Mornye core is that strong. And obviously, when it comes to toon-based teams, Mornye is going to be better than Shorekeeper, regardless of whether Lene is there or not. Lupa Mornye is going to be better than Lene Shorekeeper for an Imeth. And she's also incredibly vital to Luke, because the 50% off-toon build-up rate she provides can help Luke stack up his Toon Strain interfered stacks. In fact, without Mornye, Luke even struggles to maintain 100% uptime on this buff. So Mornye is incredibly vital towards both Imeth and Luke. So overall, when comparing her to Shorekeeper, she is a bit worse as a generalist, but Lene can help her close this gap. And when it comes to the Toon Break team specifically, Mornye is obviously going to be a better character. So ultimately, in my opinion, these things balance each other out, making Mornye a very good S-tier pull. And then we finally get to Iuno. Iuno is a bit of an interesting character, because in my opinion, she is a bit of a potential woman. She has potential to have one of the highest damage outputs in the game when using Lene and Mornye, but like I said, that duo is incredibly sought after. So if you're playing purely for meta, Iuno isn't going to get much of a chance to actually use those characters, simply because of how much other characters want them. Additionally, while the DPS Iuno team is incredibly powerful in tower, within Whimpering Wastes it's a lot worse. This is because the only real AoE that Iuno has access to is her Liberation, which is just a one take of damage nuke. This means that when it comes to killing Whimpering Wastes, she's only going to be able to wipe out one wave of enemies before having to kill enemies one at a time with her basic attacks. So ultimately, she's not going to be that good at wave wiping, which limits her into being a tower DPS who you shouldn't really use much in WuWa. However, Iuno becomes a lot stronger in WuWa, assuming you're using her with Augusta. Augusta is already a very good WuWa DPS, and adding Iuno to the equation only makes her better. This is because not only is Augusta just naturally going to deal more damage with a Iuno than with a Mortefi, Mortefi does not have good on-field damage. Most of Mortefi's damage is coming from his coordinated attacks off-field. Meanwhile, Iuno does all of her damage while she's on the field, meaning that Mortefi isn't going to be killing any waves during his field time as opposed to Iuno. But when we start looking at Augusta in tower, while Iuno is best in slot for Augusta, it's definitely not needed because of Mortefi's existence. You see why I call Iuno a potential man? In tower, she's an incredibly powerful DPS who will most likely be unable to use her best team because her best team is used by a lot of other characters. But when it comes to her supporting Augusta in tower, Mortefi is very good when it comes to that job already, meaning Iuno is definitely not needed. And then it's kind of the reverse in Whimpering Wastes. She's incredibly good when supporting Augusta over Mortefi. However, when you're trying to use her as a DPS, she's not going to be that strong. So while there are multiple reasons to pull for Iuno, they are all pretty specific reasons. Which means that if you're pulling for Iuno, you need to really have in mind why you're getting her. If the problem on your account is WuWa, you're gonna want to have an Augusta to pair with the Iuno. However, if your problem is tower, you need to assess if you have her DPS teams, because Augusta doesn't really need her. When it comes to End State Matrix, Mortefi is not a very demanded character, meaning it's very easy to just pair him up with your Augusta. However, if you have both a GN and an Augusta on your account, or you don't have another team that uses a double Toon Break core, then I can see Iuno opening up some utility. Which is why she's getting a rating of B+. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked down in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.